The purpose of mindfulness practice is so that when your emotions surge, you'll be able to. I say be able to, of course, it's a scale of how well you're able to, but you'll be able to take a step back and observe your emotions. Think about what these emotions want you to do, and then you can look at it, probably calm down and analyze what the only thing that matters, which is what actions you're taking and what actions you want to take. And also analyze, I suppose, the goals you want to achieve. So, for example, if you're particularly anxious about something, you can stop and notice that you're anxious, and then go, should I be anxious about this? What am I anxious about? What actions can I take or should I take about this thing that's making me anxious? And then go, okay, now that I've decided on my actions and the results are the only things that now are relevant variables, and the anxiety no longer, you can realize that the anxiety has no influence on your actions and your results now that you've decided. Of course, this is easier said than done. I haven't. I'm not like meditating an hour every day or anything, and I'm this like perfect emotional self control or anything like that. But that's essentially what it's for. And thinking about it that way lets you be more intentional in the future when it comes up, and then you can be better equipped in the process of improving in that direction. At least that's my theory, and so me putting it this way is meant to help me practice this self-control and work towards that by setting my goals clear. Okay. The most important factor to health and happiness is your relationships, especially the one with your spouse. Usually, I mean, some people you can have someone close enough to you that's not your spouse that takes the place of your mental health, that takes the place of a spouse in terms of maintaining your mental health. But the reason this is because your social interactions will trickle down into every other factor of your life. For example, if you have bad interactions with your friends that you don't meet as often, then it's not as okay. So the reason your spouse is the most important is simply because you're around them the most often. In theory, at least, that's the way it should be. So when you if you have bad interactions with them, then that is going to make you like, it's going to affect your base level of mood and ability to do things, and so you're going to act out in the world in other places of your life in a much more suboptimal way with a much more suboptimal mood. And I think they compared unhealthy relationships to being potentially as bad as smoking like a pack of cigarettes a day or something like that. Which, I mean, I get it, right? Because so here's the thing: if you constantly have bad interactions, it's going to build up into like just horrible. Like, it doesn't have to be your spouse. It could just be the people around you, right? So it's like, if you have healthy social interactions, it's going to also affect your motivation, your ability to actually stay focused. Because think about it. Can you remember times when you had a bad interaction and the next things you do is just nagging you at the back of your mind and you're just not able to focus properly on the next things you're doing? Now imagine having something like that every day with the people you're closest to. So, the most important factor in health and happiness is your relationships. It's actually funny. The person who mentioned this was talking about physical health because he was a trainer, and he was saying like there was exercise, diet, and he was listing the most important aspects, and he listed the relationships first, and that's because that influences the others rather than the other way around. I think it's very funny. It makes sense if you think about it, and if you picture yourself in those scenarios, it does make a lot of sense. Okay, next. Admit your fears. You don't have to say that these things are not worth fearing. You just have to admit that there are things. You have to admit that these things are things that you fear. And I'll give you some examples. Maybe you fear losing your job. Maybe you fear heights. Maybe you fear losing your partner. Maybe you fear being cheated on. And, it's like these are fears that you can have. And you can look at them, but you just have to admit them. Because if you don't admit them, you can be much more like irritable when anything skirts the topic, for example. And not just irritable, but very unpleasant, as long as it feels like it could be approaching the topic. It could be insecurities, but as long as you admit to them, you can be much more. They become much less. They're like little worms in your heart that you don't see, but when you admit they exist, then they become much smaller, kind of. I mean, that's kind of a gross example, but it's kind of how it works. Anyways, so here are the 5 steps that Mo Gaudat listed out, which is: first, understand what fear is. Name your fear. Understand your brain's fear games. Make the vow and take the leap. Ultimately, it's essentially just saying face your fears. And it's because your fear will catch up to you. But if you face it in advance, then you can pass the test. And then when it catches up to you, or when it would have caught up to you, it's not a big problem because you've already confronted the fear. For example, if you fear standing up to your bully, just stand up to your bully. And that's just an example, I guess. But like, your fear in this case is your bully, so it is what it is. It's gonna bother you every day, and you're either going to fight it and lose, but you fought it, but now you're better because now the bully, you had your battle with it, or you can fight it and it's gonna stop bothering you, which is basically how fears work. Doesn't mean you should eat a cockroach if you fear cockroaches, but other thing, actually, I don't know if I wrote a note on this later, but it's your fears and motivations can be very deep. For example, I really like the story that he brought up about his children. He had, I think they were both daughters. I think so. So he had, I think it was like the 1-year-old or I guess like 3-year-olds or something, and there was a cockroach. But her big sister hates cockroaches. So when she was little, I don't know how old she was. Let's say she was 3. There was a cockroach. She caught it and played with it and laughed as if it was a toy. And her big sister, would probably like 7 or something, saw it and screamed. And then after the scream, she now associated that with a negative thing or something that is scary. So she, dropped the cockroach and cried. And then now, she probably doesn't remember that event because she was so small. But now, if she sees a cockroach, she will scream because it's now associated with the fear. And maybe the cockroach isn't scary, but it is established as something that is scary. I really like this story because it shows you how deeply ingrained some of your programs are with your brain. Okay. So yeah, if you, for example, fear being alone, and that drives you to stay in a bad relationship, and you're just going to be annoyed, you're not going to be pleasant because the relationship sucks, and then you don't deal with the partner well. But if you just admit that you're afraid of being alone, you can just let it go and say, yeah, I mean, I'm afraid of being alone, but it's okay. That doesn't mean I have to stay in this relationship. You can just think about it, right? It's like, even though I say that, you will be single, but that doesn't mean you'll be alone. You can still find new relationships. You can You can find new friends to let you be alone, or maybe you fear the idea that you're not capable of getting a new relationship or something. But I mean, it's different, right? But it's like if you just imagine someone deciding, yeah, I'm afraid to be alone, you can already picture how that could make it easier for them to end a bad relationship because they're just now liberated because the shadow in the back that's keeping him from ending the relationship. Now he sees that and he's like, oh, that's why I'm not ending the relationship. Ah, whatever. Anyways. Here, yeah, okay, so there's a story, another story that he explains, which is similar to the one with the cockroach, which is that if you look in at the elephants in I don't know where I don't know if it's the zoo, but the elephants have like a very small chain tied to their leg, I guess. But they don't break it. They have the ability to break it, but when they were small, the chains were much stronger. Maybe it was this just as weak, but they were weaker. And so when they were small, they tried to escape, and they associated the chain as the limits of where they can maneuver. And so even though they grew up and they have the ability to break it if they wanted, they still have the ability. They still have the ingrained habit of not trying to go beyond the range of the chain. Another example is with monkeys, where there were bananas at the top of the tree, and whenever a monkey would try to climb the tree to get the bananas, they would spray the monkey with cold water. But not only would they spray the monkey with cold water, they would spray all the monkeys with cold water. So after a few times, they would associate a monkey climbing the tree for bananas with the experience of getting doused in cold water. So eventually, even though they decided they would no longer spray cold water, the monkeys no longer tested that theory. And if a monkey were to try to climb the tree, the other monkeys would pull him down and even beat him up maybe, and to prevent him from climbing the tree, because they've correlated and associated climbing with getting sprayed or a negative experience. Now, obviously, there's no way to know, and if you think about it, you would go, oh yeah, but like there's no way they could know that they wouldn't get sprayed anymore, so why would they try? Why would they risk it? And that's like, I mean, is it that bad to be sprayed by cold water? It's just like it's kind of like the cockroach again, right? So yeah, it's sometimes you just have to accept that not all of your fears are still valid. Okay. Fear is created as a biological function to avoid danger. That's why it's always exaggerated. Facing them always leaves you discovering it wasn't so bad as long as you redirect your thoughts as you do it. Okay, I don't know why I wrote as long as you redirect your thoughts as you do it. I'm not sure what that means. But yeah, so if you understand that fear is deliberately exaggerated on purpose by your brain, because that's how we evolved for it, then you realize that objectively speaking, every single one of your fears is not as bad as you fear it to be. Like, just mathematically speaking, it's not possible for your fears to be as bad as you actually fear them to be, simply because we evolved to exaggerate fears very deliberately, because we are meant to avoid danger and pursue safety. So how does your brain make you do that? It is by exaggerating your fears so that you'll be as cautious as possible. That's how you survive, and that's how your ancestors had, made it possible for you to exist today. For example, if there's a rustling in the bush, what are the probabilities that it's a tiger? No, but you should act as if it was a tiger, because there is a probability that it's the case. So there's a high probability, very small probability that it's like, maybe it's a pack of tigers. That's technically possible. So they have to exaggerate it so that you actually take action. Because if your fear was objective, most of the time you'll just ignore it, right? Because it exists to make you take action. And the thing is, right now, today, fears don't have the same consequences as they did in the past. And so we feel the same level of fear because we're still by the same creatures without the same level of danger. Especially in the case where it's wrong. Or especially in the case where our fears come to be true. Today, even if our fear comes to be true, the results aren't going to be as bad. Okay, unless you're like, doing something dangerous. In which case, that's not the same thing. Be fucking careful. Be just as careful as you would have before. But, it's mostly about the fears when you're paranoid. Like, what if they're thinking this? What if I get booed off the stage? What if my speech sucks? What if I get a bad grade? What if I get this problem wrong? What if my exam isn't good enough for me to get accepted into the university? What if they reject my resume? What if she says no? I'm just thinking of every form, but it's like, are these anywhere near bad enough to justify the level of negative emotion you feel? Okay, next. Okay, let's see. Yeah, so your brain and body is evolved and designed for survival, not happiness. Yeah, I mentioned this earlier, but it is very important because here's the thing. If you just had way less cortisol in your body, for example, you would be happier. But cortisol was what kept you alive. Nowadays, cortisol has not that much impact on survival. It does have impact on, whether or not you avoid, whether or not you catch deadlines, maybe, whether or not you get managed to stay early enough. And so the negative motivation still is necessary, because if you don't have the concern for bad circumstances, sometimes you just say, maybe it's not worth the effort, because it's not going to be that bad if things if I just don't do that. And then cortisol's to basically say it's going to be that bad, so you better get up and do it. Now, I'm not saying that's optimal for action. If you're diligent and disciplined enough to do all the things you need to do, then beyond that, cortisol is basically completely ineffective and net negative. But our biology is not optimized for us to master our Maslow's hierarchy of needs. It's only to master our physiological needs and not dying in terms of evolution. Okay, so let's talk about the 7 filters that Mo Gaudat lists, 7 features in terms of that are made for survival and not happiness. There's filters, assumptions, predictions, memories, labels, emotions, and exaggerations. Yes, I mentioned this in a previous video. I went back and listened to this section of the book again, and I wrote it down. So, when you have these things, so filters are to improve your heuristics. They're meant to make decisions fast based on previous experiences, and not basically these are all meant for fast and efficient decisions. Think about it this way. Nowadays, discrimination is bad. Racial discrimination, this discrimination, like sexist discrimination. Okay, sexist actually doesn't count because that one's kind of no matter what culture you're in, there's both sexes. But there's racial, there's cultural, there's like religious, there's however you choose class, I guess. But before, basically, it was your tribe versus their tribe, right? It's like, you don't need to go, maybe that person in their tribe is a good person, because, you just have to be protective of your group. So it's discrimination. It's obviously not good, but you had to judge people as part of the enemy camp, regardless of whether or not they might be innocent, because their camp might destroy your camp. Nowadays, that would be a horrible approach, but that's just an example. So, like, for example, if we say, I saw a tiger maul my friend, I am now going to avoid tigers and teach my people to avoid tigers. And so maybe some tigers will not maul your friends, so you don't. And you can see this kind of thing in racism. You can see this kind of thing with, for example, when some people are only exposed to a certain group of people through the news, then, and you know what kind of incidents make the news. So then when they see that any person who falls into this category that they've only seen on the news, then they're going to associate this person with the group they've seen on the news and avoid them. Probably. But you have this kind of idea. So, like, if your experiences with a certain attribute are limited to a few negative experiences, your brain puts this attribute into this negative experiences category. Which is, that's just an example. There's all 7 of them are very relevant and interesting. He gave a story about so he had a picture. Okay, you know what? I'm gonna skip this part, but you can read the book. But I will list them again. Filters. So if you just, here's the thing about filters, right? There is so much information in the world. So when you apply a filter, you focus on the informations that you are used to, and the rest is just filled out by your brain. They're basically all assumptions because your brain just fills in the gaps. So the filter is to focus on the things that your brain is used to focusing on. For example, if the bush rustles, then you're focused on the area of the bush that is rustling. And the rest is filtered out. Okay. Assumptions. This one is pretty straightforward. Predictions, when you project current events into future consequences. For example, maybe you say, my boyfriend came home late a few days this week. He must be No, wait, that's not a. Maybe that is a prediction. He might cheat, or if I don't stand up for myself in this situation, let's say like someone knocked over my eraser off the table, and if I don't stand up for myself, people are just going to assume I'm a doormat. That's a prediction. Or if, say, if we go back to the previous example, if I make it, if I miss this train, I'm never gonna make it. I'm not. Then that's gonna be a sign of a bad day, and I'm probably gonna get into a car accident. That's an exaggeration. So there's all sorts of examples you could put. The ones I gave aren't the best. The story he told was better, but I don't want to retell it because I'm gonna butcher it. So I'm just gonna move on. We treat people who are more negative as smarter. This one is very funny. Okay. Oh my goodness. Okay, so he gave another example, which is if you listen to someone, on TV, give predictions about something, the one that gives a more negative prediction, we will treat them as smarter and more informed, because that aligns with our expectations, because our expectation, we're geared towards seeing negative things. So when we see someone that doesn't see negative things, we think of them as ignorant. I'll give you an example. If you're to see someone on your news channel say, these are the dangers of global warming, these are the problems, this is what's going on, these are what the companies are doing. You think of them as more informed as someone who might say, these are what the companies are doing. This is why you shouldn't think about it yourself. You should global warming isn't really an immediate problem. We shouldn't really worry about it. You're just going to treat the first person as more informed because we are geared towards negative thinking. And this, this may not be the best example, but I think it fits, because objectively speaking, you probably as an individual should not care about global warming. Like, what you think about, it's really none of your business unless you want to start unless you want to start a business that's focused towards improving global warming. You want to focus on improving sustainable resources. You want to focus on reducing emissions of a certain type of technology. Invent something new that's gonna, reduce carbon dioxide or reduce forestry, whatever. Like, unless you want to do something big like that in the form of innovation, it's really not going, biking instead of driving a car is not going to make a difference. It just, you have your life, and life doesn't have one you, right? It's like, so just, you get what I mean. Okay. So anyways, I thought that was a very interesting statement, which is true. It's true. Okay. Confidence is not doing the same thing many times, such as having a plan, but it is adapting many times and being able to go in and do something when you don't know how it's going to go. For example, if you have, say, replaced a tire 1,000 times, and now you know that when you have to replace the tire tomorrow, you'll be fine. That's not what confidence is. Confidence is, I've went up to give a speech 1,000 times, and now I know that even if I forget my lines, I'll be able to make it work, right? It's like I have the confidence that I'll be able to adapt because I have the experience of adapting, not the experience of executing my plan perfectly 100 times. So now I know that my plan's gonna go right. I know that without a plan, I'll be fine. That's what confidence is. Now, you should have plans, but you know that if things don't go according to plan, you'll be fine anyway. You'll be able to adapt. You'll be able to do something you haven't done over and over again. Say, practice this speech 100 times. If you go off script, you'll be fine anyway, because even though you haven't practiced what you're going to be saying 100 times. Or, maybe it's like, you've run 100 obstacle courses, so you know that your new obstacle course you're going to perform very well in, because even though you haven't done it over and over again. Or I guess the best example I can give would be, for my personal experience, is I have the confidence of learning a new deck quickly because I've played many decks, rather than I have the confidence of playing, Telvanni well because I played Telvanni many times. That's the difference. Or I guess in the second one is okay, never mind. You get the idea. Okay. Do you have any thoughts or beliefs that you don't like being challenged? If you get upset when someone disagrees with a belief or thought you may have, that's not a them problem, that's a you problem. Actually, I mentioned this one yesterday. I just brought it up outside of my notes. Ad hoc explanations are a good sign that you have beliefs or thoughts that you probably are a bit sensitive about because you don't like them being challenged. So, it's the ones that you avoid challenging that probably should be challenged. Because if you're truly confident about a belief, then it doesn't matter if people disagree with you. You're okay with them being wrong, essentially, because in your worldview, in your frame of reference, they are objectively, and I know this is by definition subjectively, but from your perspective, from your subjective view, they are objectively wrong. Now, I know that sounds stupid because there's no such thing as subjective objectivity. But here's the thing. If you are so confident, if you are so absolutely confident in your opinion of something, then it's essentially objective. Now, confident and arrogant aren't the same thing. If you're actually confident, it means that you have no emotional reaction. It doesn't make you flare up. You would be extremely calm. There would be no fluctuation when people mention it. You might kindly point it out, and then if assuming that they would be, you think they're receptive, and if they show signs that they aren't receptive, you can move on. That's fine. Right? So it's like if them disagreeing makes you deeply unhappy, that's a you problem. Okay. And this is just a quote that Alex Hormozy always brings up. I forgot the name of the person that he's actually quoting here. But everyone, as in winners and losers, have the same goals. It's the willingness to pay the price that makes the difference between winners and losers. Because everything does have a price. Whether it's the amount of time you have to spend, whether it's the amount of mental energy you have to invest, everything does have a price. So, now, obviously, in terms of winners and losers, he's not talking about first place and second place, usually. It's more about people who go out and do it versus people who don't go out and do it. For example, maybe you say you want to start a business. Well, the difference between you and someone who has started a business is that both of you wanted to start a business, but he paid the price, which is the decision and commitment to start the business, because that's going to come with a list of responsibilities and things that he's going to be held accountable for every single day. Anyways, that's I've rambled on too long again today, but I'll call it a day.